Learning to sing, or rather I should say beginning the process of learning to sing, has provided me with something beyond happiness. If by happiness we mean something on the order of contentment, or the achievement of a kind of homeostasis of need fulfillment, the satisfying of what, for example, the psychologist Abraham Maslow considered to be the most basic human needs. Maslow's famous hierarchy of needs begins with the physiological requirements of life: air, water, nutrition, sleep. He places those at the bottom of the pyramid and moves up to safety and security, a roof over one's head, a reliable way to earn a living, and then to love and belonging. After that, the quaternary level of Maslow's pyramid is what he referred to as esteem, which itself is divided into lower and higher needs. The lower half includes the respect of others, status, fame, glory, recognition, attention, reputation, appreciation, and dignity. The higher, self-respect, confidence, competence, achievement, mastery, and independence. But Maslow also defined a fifth category at the apex of the pyramid, which could be reached, he said, only once all of the more basic human needs had been met, at which point one could be considered essentially satisfied or happy. The term he used for this highest need was self-actualization, one he borrowed from his mentor, Kurt Goldstein, and another earlier psychologist, Carl Rogers. And although its casual overuse in the decades since 1943, when Maslow published his theory of human motivation, has blunted its meaning, so that those of us who are sensitive to language have been conditioned to cringe when we hear it. What Maslow meant by what he called self-actualization was something very specific and very rare. So rare, he postulated, that only 2% of the population ever achieved it. Maslow's self-actualization, the fulfillment of a need that goes beyond even the types of success he categorized as meeting our esteem needs, which include artistic, scientific, and other scholarly and political achievements, and external recognition for such achievements, refers to the attainment of a human being's complete potential. Maslow defines self-actualization as one becoming more and more of what one is, becoming everything that one is capable of becoming. Now, while I haven't the hubris or the basic misapprehension of my own achievements to declare myself in full possession of the quaternary stage of the needs hierarchy, I place my singing squarely in the realm of self-actualizing. And if I will never join Maslow's ranks of the certifiably self-actualized, among whom he lists Abraham Lincoln, Thomas Jefferson, Eleanor Roosevelt, and Albert Einstein, if I do not find a way to explore every possibility within myself, everything I was born to do, and be every possible sort of thing I was meant to be, I will at least have made a start. And while I have neither the raw material nor sufficient time remaining to become a real singer, what I do have, thanks to Stephanie Henkel, are the tools to be a far better singer than I was before I stepped into her studio for the first time on that Sunday afternoon, tears running down my face that she had the wisdom and kindness not to ask about. I have, I like to think, a voice that's good enough for my purposes, good enough for me to be a serious amateur, which I tell myself is all I aspire to. Now, I have to confess that it's both the serious and the amateur parts of this formulation that please me, and although the latter is easier for me to put into words, how could it not be a great relief for me to have something I do every day that I don't have to be that good at, that doesn't feel like a matter of life and death, that doesn't define my very worth in the world or to the world? And unlike, say, photography, which I took up as a serious amateur in my 20s, or gardening, which I took up in my 40s, when I began voice lessons, it wasn't an entirely new undertaking I was taking up. It was something in me, something that was already a part of me, as much a fact about me as my being from New York, or being female, or being a writer, that I beamed a light on for the first time at the age of 50. And keeping that light on, turning my attention to singing in a way that made it an active part of my life, something I had to make time for, something that counted, was thrilling. I'd always taken it for granted before. Now I never, not for a minute, do. And I believe this is always a way to become happier, or, I suppose you could say, to reach for the apex of Abraham Maslow's pyramid, to stop taking something, anything about your life, about yourself, for granted. It's interesting to me that I have never thought of singing as my art, that I never, in my youth, considered trying to be a singer, or thought of myself as already a singer the way I thought of myself already as a writer when I was still a child. I say interesting because my sense of myself as someone who sings goes nearly as far back as my sense of myself. It's possible that this was one of the first things I knew about myself, even before I knew I was a writer, before I had any real understanding that there were places people lived other than New York City, or that my father didn't know everything there was to know. I can't remember ever not thinking of myself as someone who sings any more than I can remember not being able to read, or what it was like not to be able to express myself in spoken words. That I did not become a singer, that I became a writer and finally a teacher of writing is not an accident. It's no more an accident than anything else about who and what I turned out to be. No more an accident than who or what you turned out to be. I believe it was necessary for me to write, particularly to write fiction. I can't say I ever made a decision about it. I'm often asked, every writer is often asked, when I decided to be a writer. And I have never had an answer to that question. Writing was what I did. It felt like my life's work even when I was a child. It felt like my life's work, and I worked hard at it, always. But it never occurred to me to work at singing. Singing was no sort of work. If it never crossed my mind that many people would think of writing stories as no sort of work either, this must have been because of the reverence I had for the books I loved, which itself must have been instilled in me by my parents. My parents were always reading, in bed, at the table, in the bathtub. There were library books piled everywhere in every apartment we lived in while I was growing up, and at some point they began to amass books of their own, for the place they live in now is bulging with books. The rows of books on all their shelves too deep, stacks of books set on their sides atop the rows. And while there was music too, long rows of records, a phonograph, a piano bench filled with sheet music, the respect accorded to music was of a different order, the attention paid to it of a different kind than what was given to books. Music was for pleasure, for entertainment, an extra, a wonderful extra, but not the central thing. So I wonder, did I become a writer because it was something that came naturally to me, that was also encouraged and taken seriously and for which I was praised? And because my parents held writers in such high esteem that even when I was very small, it must have seemed the worthiest aspiration? And because reading books that other people had written felt as necessary to me as eating and sleeping? And because everything about writing, the solitude it required, the freedom to imagine a world of my own devising, the contemplation of language and the pleasure of arranging and rearranging words on a page and the sitting and thinking for hours at a time suited my temperament better than anything else I knew? Yes, certainly, yes to all of this. And there is nothing of the accidental discovery, the incidental circumstance about any of it, the way one sometimes hears of a young person, even a child, stumbling upon one of the many possible careers she might have pursued to equally good effect. For me, a life spent as a writer was a matter of key and lock. If I had not found writing, I might never have found myself. But there was another door within me beside the one that writing opened onto, one that swung open so easily I didn't even notice that it was a door. And I had no idea then that beyond that easy swinging unlocked door I had so casually breezed through, there was another one, a door I couldn't even see because I never went that far, one that was locked tight and for which I had no key. And now what I want is all the keys, because I'd like to at least peek behind and beyond every possible door, every single one. And why shouldn't I? And why shouldn't you? And that's where I start.